Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of our Industry Insight series here at Tuya Hospitality and Residential. Across the course of this series, we're going to be bringing in a series of fantastic experts across their respective industries to discuss some of the good, the bad, and the ugly of IoT implementation, such as to improve discourse and understanding from both sides of the table. Today, we'll be diving into hospitality, and our guest will be the fantastic Simone Puorto, who will bring a depth of experience from both tech and hospitality businesses to discuss a bit more about how we can bridge the gap when it comes to IoT implementation. Simone is a journalist specializing in travel tech, a keynote speaker, podcaster, consultant, author of 4 bestsellers on hotel marketing. He's a writer for leading industry blogs, an MBA lecturer for schools such as 24 or Business School, Roches and Louis, an advisory board member for BWG Strategy, founder and the CEO of Travel Singularity consulting firm, CMO for TelltheHotel, and co-founder of FunnelTV. During his career, he was general manager for an Italian boutique hotel chain and VP global accounts and quality manager for a French-American web agency. He has advised hotel groups such as Divani Hotels Collection and Louis Group in Greece, Library Hotels Collection in the US, Tiara Hotels and Resorts in France, Louis T Collection in China, and the Pavilion Hotels and Resorts in Asia and Europe. He helped to consolidate one of the main Italian hotel chains and acted as an advisor for countless startups. He defines himself as a Renaissance futurist and lives and works between Rome and Paris. Simone, I'm catching my breath introducing all the work you're doing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Well, you said it all. I think we can stop here now. Like you said everything.
I mean, wow, that's a bit of a CV you got there, Simone. I mean, just to begin, I'll let you introduce a bit about yourself and a bit about your story, because I know these days I found you online, and as you say, you're a futurist, right? And when I find you, I have this image of you being mostly very advanced in terms of the tech side, but I know, having spoken to you before, your story started way down the line back in hospitality, and you kind of moved forward. Yeah. So if you could give a quick introduction to your career and exactly the work you've been doing, and perhaps what we're seeing in the future.
Yeah, so I started around 23 years ago, something like that. Like it was 99, if I remember correctly. And I started in hospitality, and believe it or not, I didn't want to work in hospitality. So I just joined the industry because I thought it was an easy one. Mm-hmm. And I was going to the university, so I thought I had more time to study. And I was studying something completely different. I was studying philosophy, so I wanted to be a philosophy teacher. So that's that's a whole different story. And so I started working in hotels, and to my surprise, I liked it very much. Mm-hmm. And so I kept working in hotels. I did pretty much anything you can do in a hotel, like from receptionist, and then I worked a lot in MICE, and then I ended up managing a little chain in Italy of a few boutique properties in Rome. And around 2009-10, I started to get a little bored with all the operational part of the job, and I always had this passion for technology and marketing. So I started focusing a little more on marketing consultancy, and I moved to Paris for a few years. Worked with a French-American company, started consulting like all around the world. And on top of that, I was always, getting more interested in the technology. I work on a few projects we developed in this company, up until the point that I decided to open my own consulting firm. That's Travel Singularity, and the goal is to help accommodation providers to use technology wisely, and mainly to understand technology. My work is a lot about educating people to a certain extent, right? And then I started, just as you said before, I published a few books. The last one it's been published. right now. Well, actually, it's already out there for a few weeks now, and doing some MBA work, just writing for a few blogs. And again, over the years, I started focusing more and more and more and more and more on the technology, on the applications of technology, but also on the implications of technology, like even the ethical implications in about the use of technology in industry that is very anthropocentric like ours. And yeah, that is pretty much my story. Like, that's it.
I mean, on that, you're kind of the perfect guy to be on the show today, because, you know, I've spoken in previous webinars about the fact that we are proudly an IoT company, and we're proudly making mistakes in terms of sometimes our understanding of hotel people. I had a webinar last week and we spoke about it's almost like speaking a complete different language when dealing with the hospitality industry, and we're learning to improve that as we go. But your role as a researcher and just the quality and the quantity of the content you put out and the information has actually both really helped me when I've been following you over the past months and years, but also I'm sure for all the people you work with. And I can see in the background, you've got Distribution 2050 sitting there nicely on your course.
Yeah.
So would you mind introducing a little bit about Distribution 2050? I know we've discussed a bit in the past. What was the aim of writing it, and kind of what is the attraction for those looking to come and read it, and what would be your advice to people?
Well, I think you said something that can actually describe the book quite well. And that is the fact that today, well, I think we always had that, but now it's probably more evident. There is a disconnection between hoteliers and technology, okay? And the fact is that when I started, well, and of course, even before, the technology needed to run a hotel was very, very minimal, okay? Like many properties, especially here in Southern Europe, they didn't have a PMS. So that was the level of tech adoption, right? And over the course of these last 20 years, we had an explosion of technology on pretty much every field, you know, from revenue management to, again, IoT and all kind of software in between. And this is something that I found frustrating myself as well when I was a hotelier, because the problem is, like, and this is something that I always say, you know, when you work in hospitality, probably you need to be more concerned about the quality of your pillows than the quality of your software, right? And you got so much things to do operationally that you cannot keep up with technology. It's just impossible. You just don't have the time. And that is why there is people like me that you know, can help you out, like joining the dots of technology. And this is why you know, this is why I published the book that you see here. And the idea is, you know, the title comes from the concept of singularity, technological singularity that has been, you know, it's been around for a while, but it's a moment in time when we think that we will have enough computational power and artificial intelligence improvement to create some kind of new era of technology. Let's put it like that. And we see that all the technologies that we see now are going towards that direction, right? The problem I do have, especially in hospitality, because if you talk about like tech singularity in industries like gaming, people they do understand exactly what you're talking about, right? They got all the fundamentals right. Like they understand blockchain, they understand NFT, they understand microtransaction, all this kind of thing. You start talking to this kind of technology to hoteliers, probably they will not understand it. But this is not because they're stupid. This is just because they have so many other things to do during the day that they cannot keep up, you know? And so the idea of the book is, I always say that this is like more like a philosophical book to a certain extent. So you will not, like, if you read it, you will not learn how to do something. Like you will not be able to run a Facebook campaign after that. But my goal is just to make you understand that, look, there are some technologies that are rising. Some of them are already mainstream and adopted in many other industries. So it's probably the time that you start looking into that and you start implementing it. So that was like the main idea, just to write something that is still technical to a certain extent, but can be understood by people that is not necessarily super tech savvy.
I think it's interesting that, again, it kind of aligns with the reason we're having this conversation today. And particularly from our side, we've realized there's a huge gap in terms of the discourse between us as tech businesses and hoteliers. We're guilty of it. Often hundreds of companies out there we've seen are guilty of it. And again, it comes back to the point you mentioned that hoteliers are very busy people. They don't call it hospitality hours for no reason, and they have a million things on their plate. And again, we're going to have a lot more of a discussion today about semantics, but this is kind of the idea of why I'm trying to host not only this webinar series, but also trying to put out more content to kind of break down some of the jargon that we often like to use on the IoT side of things, and to translate that into real world use cases in hospitality. First of all, once there's a basic level of understanding, then we can go into specific things. It's more about, again, sifting through each aspect of, regardless of whether or not it's IoT or anything else, and translating that into real world value, so that then we can know and move forwards and kind of decide which technologies we're going to adopt and then how we're going to adopt them. So it's really interesting work. And I think it kind of leads us into what we want to speak about first today, is that I know when we had a conversation before, the word you use is a problem around semantics, right? And I think particularly with IoT, again, we're quite bad with that, using the term smart hotel, which I know is a big no-go for you. So, I mean, we're going to discuss the reasons why, and I think we're flipping to the same page as you on this. Could you explain the problem around smart hotel, exactly the phrase, and then kind of what you like to use instead?
Okay, that's a good one. Well, let's say that every time I hear the word smart, I raise my eyebrows. And that is because, like, when you say that something is smart, you're implying that what you were doing before was stupid. Okay, was dumb. And you got it like in Europe, for example, over the last 2 years, as you can imagine, we talk a lot about smart working, right? That, again, I found it semantically terrifying. Like, it's like saying, okay, you've been stupid for thousands of years, and now you're like enlightened and you understand how work actually works. That's actually not the case. Okay. And especially when it comes to IoT, the problem is that when we say smart hotels, it's like if we are talking about something that is so far away in the future, so science fiction like, but when you break it down, that is actually not the case. Actually, probably it's the complete opposite. And I think when we first started having this conversation, I made you an example that to me is quite fitting, and that is the fact that I would say up until 10, 15 years ago, there was a gap between the technology you had in your apartment and the technology you could find in any hotel, right? And usually the technology you found in a hotel was way better than the technology you had in your apartment. Like, I remember probably the first time I've seen a flat screen, it was in a hotel, and we still used to have this, crazy big boxes. And so you were kind of used to the fact that, like going to a hotel was even an experience, because you were experiencing some new technology that you were not used to, right? Or anyway, a better technology, a better version of the technology that you had in your apartment. But today, the situation is pretty much quite the opposite. And the level of technology that we do have in our apartments is probably way better than the average technology you can find in any hotel room, right? And so there is this connection that is getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and especially when it comes to the like normal hospitality sector, because, and this is where the paradox kicks in to me, is that like I really don't like apartments when I travel. You know, I'm a hotel guy. But my wife, she does like apartments, so she decides, and we go to apartments. That's it. You know, when it's later, and the problem is that, and I can see that this gap is less visible when you go to an apartment, like to an Airbnb, right? And I have my own theory on that, and that is probably because when you only have one room to improve, it's probably easier and cheaper. And you can also make the mistake to get the wrong technology. And if it's not working, or if it becomes obsolete, you just need to change the technology for one apartment, right? It's way different when you have like a 200 key hotel, and maybe you want to, like, a typical example can be, you want to give your guests the opportunity to get in the room without a key, right? So keyless technology. And you pick up the wrong provider, and this provider is not connected to your PMS, for example, or it got bankrupted or whatever. And at some point, you end up with a piece of technology that's probably unusable. And that is, I always do this example, probably too young to remember, but at some point in the past, you know, older people like me could probably relate to that. I'm a movie freak, okay? So I like movies a lot. And at some point we had this new format that was called the laser disc. And the laser disc is like a DVD, but bigger. It's like as big as a vinyl, right? And it never worked. Like, it was never adopted on a mainstream level. And like stupid people like myself ended up with a Laserdisc reader that it's pretty much unusable, you know. And but it's okay, you know, like, you do it in your place, like whatever, you just throw it away. Just think about the fact that you have to change your technology on 250 rooms. That start to be very expensive. So I can understand why some hotels, they don't want to risk it, and this opens a whole new problem, and that is the lack of technological standards in our industry that actually create this problem. So yeah, this is the, to me, it's one of the main paradoxes of our industry today, and that it's this connection between what you think you will find in a hotel and what you actually find. So when you're talking about smart, this is where I don't get it, because you're actually not talking about a hotel that is smart. You're just talking about a hotel that is trying to keep up with the level of technology that guests expect, and that guests probably already have in their apartments.
It's, I mean, me and you have spoken about this before, right? And it's a degree of friction for people. Like, is there friction for you when you attend a hotel or go visit, right? For the most part, in regards to technology, that friction normally actually comes, we see, from companies who try and go too far with the tech, and there's friction when you have to learn it. And we're now in this kind of transition period in which, as you say, this adoption of IoT, particularly in people's homes, is increasing. And that friction is kind of going to flip over the next few years, in which when you enter the hotel and you're met with standards that you're not used to anymore, right? The things you have in your home are no longer in the hotel. So you have to kind of revert. And I'm not saying it's a tragedy that, you know, if you have smart lighting in your home and you get to the hotel and you can't call Alexa to dim the lights, you're not going to be fuming in the next 2 to 3 years. It's not the case. But again, we'll talk today about how do you find the balance. Sorry, go on.
For now, I think, I don't know if I agree completely with you, because I think this is a problem for now. Like, remember at some point, and I don't know if you remember that, but at some point, like, Wi-Fi in hotels was something that you were not always expecting, right? And especially in the US, like, you were expecting to pay for Wi-Fi. Now today it would be impossible just to think about it, right? You go the first thing you do when, like the first thing I do, but I think a lot of people can relate to that. When you check in is you ask for the Wi-Fi password, right? So you're not to guests today. Wi-Fi is as important as the bed and the pillow, right? And you expect to have it, to have good Wi-Fi, and you expect Wi-Fi to be free, right? And of course, this didn't come overnight. You know, there was a period of time where we were not expecting that. But there will be a certain moment in time where we do expect some level of technology. Now, some of the tech we're seeing today probably will not be mainstream adopted, and that's fine. But some of them will. And so, you know, I think our job, like mine and yours, will be to understand where the industry is going, understand where is the hype, and where is the right application for this technology, and you know, and suggest entrepreneurs what to implement and what not to implement, because otherwise this gap will be always bigger and bigger and bigger. At some point, the friction you talk about will be so big that it will be very frustrating to actually go to a hotel.
I think it's, again, for now is a very big term with that. And I think pre-COVID, there was a bit less pressure, let's say, particularly towards hotels on this. However, you know, we love talking about the pandemic, but particularly in regards to IoT adoption and then also hotels, we've had an environment in which everyone is now focusing on home improvements. So from the IoT side, we've seen really massively increased adoption in, let's call it smart home for now, as the industry will be called, in that people are, you know, as you know, working from home and spending time and money into investing, improving that environment. So the adoption has gone really well in that sector. But of course, like we speak to hotels all the time, and normally the phrase is, okay, just let us get back on our feet post-COVID, and then we'll kind of consider this. And again, that for now period is getting shorter and shorter. And we're not here today to scaremonger any hoteliers who are here. We're not trying to tell you that the end is coming and, you know, your tech's going to be obsolete. What we kind of want to discuss today, I hope, is, like you say, picking the key things that we would suggest in the short term, implementing. And then I guess what we try and do at Tuya as well is, as much as possible, provide a platform that you can just continually build that stack as you go forwards. Because it kind of jumps back to the point you said, right? In that if you pick, for example, that smart lock provider who goes bust, you've only got one piece of the puzzle. And all of a sudden, if you want to start adding things on top of that, you have to consider integrations with the lock provider, with the PMS. And then if one piece of that slips, you're in a bit of a sticky situation. So, I mean, I guess I'll just quickly introduce what we do here at Tuya a bit. I know I've told you before, is that we were working a lot in smart home previously, and also ranging with companies like Siemens, or working with Lidl doing the smart home range. And we saw, particularly for hospitality, less so for apartments, there wasn't really any mainstream systems in place for the management of like the whole IoT going into the hotel, particularly on a very, let's say, basic level in terms of the language. We looked and we didn't see a hospitality industry focused solution for the management of not just one, let's say smart Airbnb or Airbnb, but again, a whole hotel. So it was just infeasible to try and implement this, because hoteliers were trying to say, take those different pieces of the puzzle. Like they go and find an energy savings provider who will install the sensors, then a smart lock company who will do that. We kind of realized that we have this platform full of smart devices, you know, it's been fantastic. And we've had software developers from around the world building on top of it. And we said, okay, let's try and make an industry focused solution to make sure that we can speed up the adoption. Just because the feedback we were getting was that it was hoteliers being like, look, we've been trying to find a way to do this. But as you say, we're really concerned at the moment, A, with COVID right at the beginning, and B, you know, service and putting linen on the beds. Trying to put together this technological puzzle right now is just not on the agenda. So what we do is to try and make it really accessible. And I was kind of explaining to you before, we don't really tend to focus so much on the end hotel as our partner. What we do is that we take what we've got from our IoT platform. We first made a SaaS platform, and we call it a B2B system. So it's targeted more for those companies. Let's say a hotel management company or an Airbnb company. They can white label the whole thing and then go and take that to their hotel end clients and then deliver that as a smart solution. Because, you know, we don't kid ourselves. A, we're not complete experts in hospitality. We don't speak the language. We're just here to provide the businesses who are with the tools that they need to kind of speed up the adoption. And then on a further level beyond that is just any tech businesses or hotel businesses with some software development skills. We essentially open up our IoT platform that we use to make that SaaS model and say, take what you need and integrate it into your systems. So our end goal for this is as an IoT platform is just on a very broad point, increase adoption, of course, which helps our business. And, we hope it improves efficiencies around the world. And then specifically towards hotels, it's increasing the number of people who can jump into this market by reducing the barriers that were previously there. We don't consider ourselves as the end solution provider. We're just a platform. Consider it like a toolbox, basically. So if you're looking to get into IoT, we, as a business, we say, come find us. We can see what we can do and we'll consult with you.
And you said something that really resonated with me, because this is a problem that I don't see only with IoT. I see it with tech providers as well, like RMSs, for example, right? And a lot of these people building the software is not people coming from the hospitality space. And that's a problem, because you will not be able to understand all the nuances of the industry, right? This is a very, like, hospitality, if you think about it, it's a very nuanced industry. There are so many aspects that you need to consider. Well, I'm not saying it's like rocket science, but there are so many things that they need to work in a certain way to make a hotel experience good. And that is like the soft skill of the people working there, and the technologies trying to work as frictionless as possible, and so forth. So it's and I see, like, daily companies and vendors that they probably have a good software as well, but they don't understand exactly what the hotels want and what the hotels need. And this is where things start to go south, usually, in tech adoption. So I can even understand why entrepreneurs working in the hospitality space sometimes are so reluctant to implement any kind of technology, because they probably had some bad experience in the past. And probably this bad experience comes from the fact that the provider providing that technology didn't really understand the needs of the hotel. And this is true also for consultancy. Like, I know, I won't name them, but I know a lot of consultants, hotel consultants, that have never worked one single day in hotel. And that to me is like, boom, it just lose my mind every time. It just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, you're totally right. I think this is where a lot of the companies fail, and that, and of course the problem of integration. It's a big one. I think I published like a dozen pieces on the topic. It's always a hot one.
Yeah, it's, again, we just don't kid ourselves, right? We have team members who come from both the hospitality and residential sectors, and they helped us build the product. However, again, we know we're not the complete experts. We leave it to you guys. We just say, look, we provide the IoT tech, which is normally the entry point difficulty for most people. They have a great idea, but they think, okay, right. For example, I want to do a startup that does smart or IoT related hotel stuff. Okay, I need to go and raise the investment, find a developer team to go and make this, and then start putting it into the market, and you just kind of write it off the table. What we say is that it's all ready to go. Just take your knowledge regarding hospitality, then use our tech, and then go and implement it. That's kind of what we focus on. Otherwise, I think if I was trying to learn hospitality lingo, I'd have to take like a 2-year sabbatical, go and work in a hotel, on the front desk, and then I'd finally figure out how it runs. It'd be chasing up the wrong tree, right? So that's what we try and do. And I guess what we'll talk about today is we'll focus down the IoT sector. And again, let's break down that, smart hotel term into more realistic terms. And I guess when we use interconnected hotel is the word you use. And I love that. It's at the moment, and I guess particularly from your experience over the past 5 to 10 years, which aspects of IoT have you seen being introduced? Like smart access is a really common one. Which ones do you see as like near-term future, you should be considering this? And then which ones do you think are like, you need to do this soon, otherwise you're in trouble?
Yeah. Well, look, I always say that COVID, it was like a nightmare for all of us. economically, politically, medically, but it did something good, and it was to accelerate the adoption of some tech, right? And especially in a world like the hospitality sector that is historically quite slow in adopting new technology, I think we accelerated the process by probably 6-7 years minimum, right? And of course, I think the one that you need to implement, like yesterday, is touchless technology. Yeah. So like just make sure, and there are already several studies on that, on the fact that post-COVID, a lot of the usually properties that implemented some level of touchless tech, like keyless entrance in the room, for example, or online check-in, for example, they had a better results that hotels that actually didn't, and that is, I think, what, again, nothing of that is new. Like I think Hilton probably started being keyless in 2014. So I mean, it's nothing new. But for the first time, I think like even smaller independent properties understood that this could give them an advantage, right? And I think something interesting happened, and that was that, like, people, and I'm talking about guests now, that never really even thought about self-checking in, or not having an interaction with a human before going into their room. They started to taste this new approach because of COVID, because they were forced to have that. But now they probably kind of like it because they know that they can remove what I call the logistics of travel, and this is something I talk a lot about in my book. And that is the fact that, to me, like, a good technology should be invisible, right? And a good technology should take the human factor and the human value and bring the human value back where the human value is actually needed, right? Like when you check in to a hotel, there are several things that a receptionist will do for you that will not improve one bit your experience. Like, to me, the fact that there is a human being or a machine taking my passport or my credit card would not improve my experience, right?
Yeah.
It's like when you go to a supermarket, like, I always ask this question to whenever I talk about that, like, just tell me the last time you had a great experience at a supermarket. They don't even know what you're talking about. And that's the fact that when you go and, the only thing a human being is doing on a supermarket is scanning your items, and that's it. You probably don't even remember the name of the person. And but on the other hand, for example, you would like to have some kind of human connection with the people working in a hotel. And to me, we're getting on a scary situation right now where, for example, when we do hire receptionists that, again, to me, are the diamond of any hotel strategy. Like I can do whatever I want. Like, I can do a perfect marketing strategy. You can do, like, create a perfect frictionless experience in the room. But if something goes wrong with the receptionist doing check-in, everything goes out of the window, right?
First impressions.
Yeah. And so the problem right now is that we are hiring receptionists not because of their soft skills and because they can actually interact with the guests, but because of their knowledge of the software. Now, like, I can understand that, as a hotelier, I don't want to retrain somebody on my PNS.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, I will take somebody that is a little more tech savvy than soft skill kind of guy. And that is a problem, And so my whole idea is, if we can reduce the workload, the technical workload of humans, we can remove humans from boring, repetitive tasks and put them back on where the human value actually is, right? And it can sound like a paradox, but the only way you can do that is with frictionless technology. And that is, of course, anything that is, self check-ins, keyless technology, touchless tech, and so forth. And again, this doesn't mean that you have to replace people, but this means that you need to give guests a choice between being served by a human and being served by a machine, So, and let me tell you, I don't know if I told you this before, but before COVID, I was traveling probably 100, 120 nights a year, right? So and I did it for 10 years. So probably I slept in 1,200 hotels over my life, just for work. And I do remember only one good check-in experience. And actually, that was the only time that actually I didn't have a check-in.
Right.
What happened is that I got into this place. I will not name the hotel. And there was a self-check-in kiosk. And I started checking in, and the receptionist was going around. They didn't even have desks. Okay. And he looked at me, and I was there for work. So I was probably late as usual, a little nervous. They said, look, I can do two things for you. You decide. First, I can check you in, so you don't do it by yourself. Or two, I can grab you a beer and we have a drink together. So you finish your check-in, then we sit and we have a beer. And I said, whoa, that is the best thing that ever happened to me. So I ended up my check-in and I sat down with this guy for 15 minutes. We shared the beer together. He told me a little about the city, and it was like the best experience I always had. And this is where the human value is, I don't care if you take my passport. I don't care if you take my credit card. I don't care if you talk to me. And this is what I think is like the implementation that hotels should do like yesterday. At least give your guests a choice, between humans, machines, or an interaction of the two, right? And then there are some other technologies that are a little slower in adoption. Like, I don't know if you remember, like 5-6 years ago, we were always talking about voice, like something that was coming like in a week. Really didn't. So I would say that the only thing you should do is just make sure that, of course, you don't have to be like a nerd, a geek, but you need to understand at least where technology is going, so you don't invest in the wrong piece of tech, because otherwise you will get into that vicious circle you were talking about it before.
It's interesting you bring up that example of your best check-in experience, because I pull up a similar one, and I think I mentioned it last week. So in a previous webinar, so I won't go too much into it, but I think the longest I've ever spent in the check-in desk, besides maybe one time I had a flight delay, the longest I've ever spent was in a hotel where there was no desk. And it was the same thing. It was probably the smartest hotel I've been to. I won't name names. And again, it was the people in that, let's call it waiting area and not the check-in desk, were there to serve you. This particular one did like to have the tech side marketing focus. So there was like VR machines and things to go and play with. But it was more of an art exhibit, actually. They had all this art being showcased. You can go and look around. And the people, again, were walking around there. And I remember I asked one of them, I mentioned I worked in a similar industry. And I was like, oh, do you mind giving me a tour? And she's like, yeah, sure, I'll show you around. Go and show you all the cool stuff, and shows you around the hotel. And it's again that service side, because I think it's a real common thing you probably found in that every tech company likes to preach that our tech will not replace your staff. It's there to enhance it. And I think we hear that a lot. We're guilty of it as well. But in my experience, this is one of the best examples, particularly in that when you enter the hotel, that kind of process, like you say, similar to going to a supermarket, that is normally like this automated process in your brain, that if something goes wrong with that, it's a real problem. Like the same way when you drive to work in the morning, it's something that you're on autopilot, but then if there's traffic, that's a real problem, right? It's the same thing with the check-in. But whereas when you have that unique experience of someone can serve you, particularly when you walk into the hotel for the first time, that leaves a really huge impression. And I think this is still more on the guest focus side. But when we look at the implementation, particularly of smart lock tech, we'll move on to other parts in a sec, is that you kind of need to distinguish between, was the innovation driven by the emergence of the tech, or is it being pushed by something outside? So when we saw the adoption is real heavy adoption of smart locks in Airbnbs, because this came out and then all of a sudden these guys managing 5 properties across the city were like, oh, so I don't have to either go and visit the property every time someone arrives or pay for a guy to do it for me. So like as soon as the tech came out, Airbnb managers were like, yes, this is going to solve me so many problems. But at the end of the day, a hotel at that time pre-COVID could still run because, people still show up, they're used to the same process, they get the card and they go in. So at that period with Airbnbs, it got so widely adopted that even for me, now if I go to an Airbnb and I have to wait for someone to show up, I remember back in my, let's call it younger days, had a bit of fun, went out with a friend, came back to the Airbnb in Hong Kong, it was at 3 a.m, had a very, let's say, tricky phone call with the landlord saying I need the keys. And, it's these things now that the tech emerging obviously solved that, and now it's an expectation. But then we flipped to hotels, and hotels could still, honestly, they operated just fine because everyone was doing the same thing. Then COVID hit, as you said, and this is when we talk about the external factor pushing the tech. And over the past 3 years now, we've seen that's really driven the adoption of that contactless check-in, just because it's become an absolute necessity, really. And again, it turns from, giving the example of, again, me having that encounter at 3 a.m. in Hong Kong, is that now over that time, it's become a standard. And when I go to an Airbnb, I'm expecting a text being like, here's the code to get in. Again, I think I'll be on the same page with you in that this is something that, yes, probably should have been implemented yesterday with hotels, because now it's going to be the same thing. There's been really heavy adoption of particularly the access over the past few years. And now I'm not yet at a point, it'll be very soon when I arrive at a hotel, and I'm expecting, again, a really good level of service when I get into that check-in area. But also, again, that code to get into the door and the access, I can control it with my phone, or at least still have the ability to control it in a number of different ways, which kind of leads me, go ahead.
No. I think you're totally right. But I think you said something that is really fitting. And that is the fact that, yes, COVID did accelerate the process. But I think the rise of apartments like Airbnb did as well, because especially during the first wave of COVID, a lot of people were choosing apartments over hotels because they felt this was safer, right? And again, they started playing with the technology. So they said, okay, look, I can probably go into the apartment without having to call somebody and wait, just have a code and get my keys. And that is pretty convenient at the end of the day. And they start to get used to that. The fact is that, I think that every technology that can actually improve your quality of life will be adopted at some point. Technology for sake of technology doesn't mean anything. That is where you need to divide the hype and the real good technology. Let's put it like that. But again, this is cool. So, and especially, let me give you another example. Then we move quickly to the next one, but I think it's quite fitting. There's a hotel in Switzerland that I go pretty often, like I would say 6 times a year, right? So they should know me by now. And they know that I always go there for work. So the only thing I want is to just get my key, get to the room, just do what I have to do. And it's not because I'm being unpolite. It's because it's a long trip to get there. It's not very well connected. It's quite frustrating to get there. And you can, if you're good at soft skill, you should read my face and you should understand that. And every time I go there, they just start with this long, like Baroque check-in, where they tell you like everything, like, okay, you could get on the spa or in the wellness center, or we got this beautiful menu. And I'm here for like one night. I have a meeting tomorrow at 7. Like I will probably sleep 5 hours. I just want to go to my room. Okay. And this is where we don't get it. Like this human touch, like quote unquote human touch, is something that maybe guests don't always want. Sometimes they just want to get straight to the rooms. Okay. And again, the more we start playing with these different approaches. And a little bit is we're getting used to that because of Airbnb, and a little bit is because of COVID. There will be a point where we expect that in a hotel, and again, it will not be like the henna in Japan, where you got like dinosaur androids checking you in. That is like
fired,
marketing
didn't they,
stuff.
I think the dinosaur fired recently.
It's a marketing stunt. That's something else. And that's another problem with technology. I think there are mainly two problems. One is that when you talk about technology, you can just say, just a phase, or it will never catch up. And just always remember that Bill Gates at some point said that the internet was just a phase. So everybody can be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is like making the technology like spectacular in the Hollywood sense. Like, okay, we got whatever piece of technology you implement in your hotel, you will become a science fiction hotel. That's really not the case, And I think at some point we will have a balance, what I call the hybrid hotel, where you can actually choose if you wanna do anything with a human being, or if you want to go straight to your room and leave, And I think that will be pretty much the approach. That's why I'm saying, if you want to implement technology, this is not science fiction. Well, actually, this is something you had to implement last year, minimum.
It's when we look at the IoT side from our perspective, at least probably for the next 5 years, it's not about making that guest make the choice that I have to use this IoT smart solution now. It's, for example, let's talk about in-room control. Is the smartest hotels I've been to, yes, I can still go and flick the light switch and the lights turn on for me. I can still flush the toilet without having to call Alexa to do it for me. It's the point is more about offering the extended range of control with the room or the hotel stay that you would have in your home, right? So like there's still all the option, particularly on the tech side. If I want to walk in the room, I'm 60 years old, I'm living back in my house in the cottage in the countryside. Of course, I don't have smart tech installed. So that friction will come if there's not the light switch on the wall, right? However, that being said, it's about giving the choice. So for me, so the younger generation who does have this in my home, I want to be able to get in there and control the things in the same way that I would in my house, right? This is what we're talking about. The smartest hotels I've been to, they will always have that level of analog control. So again, it's the choice with the tech, but then also, like you mentioned, with, do I choose to interact with the people at the hotel on the human side? And it's just increasing the range of ability you can use to interact with your stay. And it's about that degree of hyper personalization and making sure each guest is the maximum range of choice available to them so that there's none of that friction, right? And this is what we talk about with personalization in hotels. From my understanding, the level of hyper personalization we like to talk about, in which, I walk into the hotel and it knows the temperature of my bath. It's here, right? It is here now. And we do that here at Tuya. However, I wouldn't call that an urgent one. I think we can start implementing it now. And we do see a lot of hotels doing it. Just knowing, for example, okay, Simone's coming for the 6th time, he's here on work. Okay, on a simple level, I know that I don't need to bother him on his stay. I know that he likes the temperature to be XYZ because I can see on that. That can be started to be implemented, but it's just coming in stages, right? And when we look at the implementation of any tech, I think in terms of a piece of advice that I would give to hoteliers moving forwards is have the next stage in mind always. I think we can talk about this a bit. Is that it's often that you'll have a salesman come to you at a conference and sell you this fantastic individual piece and say, okay, look, we have this amazing smart lock solution, or we have this Alexa solution for your hotel, or we have whatever. You get sold on it, you implement it, and then you didn't have in mind the next piece of technology that's going to become relevant. And then that becomes a problem, right? So, I mean, what we try and do as much as possible is at Tuya, we create a platform that we've tried to predict at least 5 years ahead. And include as much of the tech in terms of IoT you need for a hotel so that you can build the stack as you go. And we prefer to do it that way. We just see problems at the moment in that, mostly because of the availability of the tech. So that's why we open up our platform to give to these providers. It's just that people get sold on an individual piece. And then the problem they have is that, okay, I didn't think 2 years ahead, what's going to change now? And now I have to fix this again. And then it comes back to hoteliers again, getting sick of those tech guys coming and selling me stuff, I just don't want to do this. So, I mean, on
Yeah.
the point of advice, it's you work with so many hotels and tech companies. What advice from your side would you give to a hotelier in particular to begin with? Then we'll move to tech companies. So advice to hotels in terms of implementing tech and specifically things around IoT, if you have any insight on that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, again, I don't think that you should implement any new piece of technology just for the sake of it, you know, and that is where we're all guilty, like consultants, techno enthusiasts, like, of course, like to me, like I love technology. So look, if I find a robot cleaning up my room, that's for me, that would be cool. Okay. But maybe it's not in your company's values. So it's probably something that you need to think about. So first of all, company values.
Right.
Yet you don't have to be blinded by the company values, because you need to understand what your guests are expecting and how your guests are changing. And you hear a lot that, you know, like you talk to hotels and they say, look, my average client is 60 plus. Okay. So yeah, I know, but you know, there's something like very inevitable with our lives, and that's the fact that these people will not be there forever. And probably you need to start thinking about a new generation that probably wants something slightly different, right? So sometimes I understand that there is this lack of vision, and you say 5 years, and I think in some cases, hoteliers they are not even capable of looking 6 months ahead. But again, I think the problem is always because they're like burdened with operational tasks. And the second one is, so let's say, does it fit your company values? Yes or no? So let's move to the next stage. Do my guests want that? Yes or no? That's easy. You just do a semantic analysis of your reviews. You will understand what your guests want, okay? Third, and this is a little more complicated, you need to divide the hype from the real good application of technologies. And I don't think hoteliers will be able to do that, because again, in order to do that, you need to understand technology at least to a certain level. And this is where, again, people like myself or yourself come into place. Like a lot of my clients, they just stay with me because they want to make sure they're always updated the latest technology, but they want to know, look, should I do this, or is it just something that is going to fade away in 2 months? Like, and I call it like the clubhouse paradox.
Yeah.
You know, like at some point, like I had hotels calling me. I said, look, should I open a clubhouse channel? I said, no. You know, this is going away in 3 months. And of course you can be wrong, but you know, we spend more time reading, you know, about technology, talking to technology vendors, so maybe we have a clear understanding of what is going on with tech, right? And again, because the risk of implementing the wrong piece of tech is quite high. And then we got the final, and I think this is the biggest problem we have in our industry today, and that's the problem of integrations, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes you see some entrepreneurs that would really love to implement new technology, but they cannot do it because they're still, you know, cursed by these old legacy systems that works in silos. And there's nothing you can do. You know, the only thing you can do, again, it's probably just, you know, before you want to implement like keyless entrance, probably we need to change that PMS that has been coded in the 80s, and now it's a mess of spaghetti code, and it will not connect to anything. And this is, and of course, I don't expect, and I don't even want that hoteliers understand like what an open API is, or you know why you should, like it's our job to explain this in simple terms for them. And again, not because they're stupid, but because when I go to a hotel, I don't want to talk to a tech savvy people. I just want to talk to somebody that understand how my pillows should be like, you know, how the temperature should be like. You know, I'm not going to a tech shop. So that's the problem of implementation over there. And I know, I don't know what's the, well, I kind of know what the situation is over there because I do have a few clients in Asia. But here in Southern Europe is pretty bad. Like we are cursed with too many local providers, like Mickey Mouse companies with like five clients, and so we need to clean this up. Again, I think COVID really helped in a way, because it was like we had a 2 years of low season, right?
Yeah.
So we had the time to sit down and change some of the basic technology for a lot of my clients. You know, like I had a client, for example, with basically no low season. Okay, so it was leisure, but it was also MICE, weddings. So it was always running at 100% occupation rate. That's great, but changing technology when you're running at a 100% occupation rate is a nightmare. And so, you know, when COVID hit, we started changing some basic tech, you know, especially the PMS. And now we can actually do more stuff. And, you know, my dream is that at some point we will be in an agnostic kind of industry where implementing any technology will be as easy as installing an app on my phone. And if I don't like it, after a couple of days, I can just remove it and uninstall it, and that's it. Now this is not the case. One, because again, you get a problem because like changing technology is hard, especially when you're running at full occupation rate. And second, because of crazy contracts. Like when you read some of these binding PMS's contract, you say, "Whoa, this is like it's impossible to get out of there. You need like a team of lawyers to get out of this contract." So yeah, I think that is the main that is this. I would say that these are the three main problems I see.
Do you think there's a correlation from what you've seen, particularly over in Europe, between PMS being used and level of technology being implemented? That might be a stupid question. I think I know the answer, but
it's not a stupid question. It's the central question.
Yeah,
it's actually the central question. Again, you have people that want to do things better, smarter. Look, let me give you a stupid example. Like a lot of hoteliers, they don't realize how much time they spend on charging credit cards. Okay. Now, let's say you make a booking on whatever OTA, right? So what happens is that the front office team will receive the reservation. Now, in a perfect world, this will run all through the PMS payment gateway, done. Okay, there's nothing to do. I still know hotels that have to do two things. The first one is making a copy of the reservation, putting the reservation inside the PMS manually with all the problems that you can imagine. And on top of that, checking the credit card manually as well. So they take the POS, they start, you know, typing the numbers, checking if the card is working or not, pre-authorize the card or charging the card if it's non-refundable. And if it doesn't work, they go back to the OTA, opening a report and waiting for another credit card. And I started timing these people because I wanted to understand a little better. And you know, something like that can take up to 10 minutes. Okay. Now imagine you got like 20 reservations a day. So I'm talking about a small property. That's 200 minutes of one of your guys just charging credit cards, right? And you can remove that simply by a payment gateway. And the problem is that a lot of PMSs, they don't support that. And so maybe you want to do it, but you cannot do it. And you're always in the same problem, you know? Okay, let's change the PMS. But changing a PMS is probably the most, I always say this thing, it's a joke, but it's probably serious. After divorcing, changing PMS is the most stressful thing you can do, you know? Because it just, you need to retrain people, you will lose data, it will be a pain, you know? And so a lot of hoteliers, they don't want to do it. Say, look, I don't want to change the PMS now. Like, let's do this manually and let's waste a lot of time on that. So your question is not stupid. Your question is actually one of the central questions in our industry today.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a correlation. It's a personality thing and your attitude towards management, right? In that if you see there's a problem, And for example, the example you gave, wasting loads of time, it's, are you in a position where you think, okay, look, we need to change this now? We see a lot of companies at the moment who, I mean, our clients generally are people who come to us and have the attitude to change things, right? They're coming to an IoT solution provider. But I guess the message we're trying to get across today is probably more for those, let's say, old school guys who are, let's not say stuck in their ways, but it's a stressful time, COVID, changing a PMS, particularly if you're trying to hold on to whatever guess you may have, is a tricky thing to do. But, embrace change before it's too late. It's not a scaremongering tactic, but it's true. I think it's interesting from my side, and I'll kind of get your perspective of what you're getting on the ground in Europe, that for me, the process of visiting a hotel now here in China has become like very standard for myself. I visit a 2-star beach shack an hour's out of the city, and it's still smart locks, and there's an app that I can use to get in, right? It's just become massively widespread. And then particularly on like the way in which I do commerce in there as well, less so on the IoT side, is that everything's very, very interconnected, as you like to say. Largely down to that we have WeChat and Alipay, which are ecosystems here. So like everything's just ridiculously connected. So to guide you through an experience that I have, that let's say an average business hotel that isn't using technology as a marketing ploy, is that I make my booking on my OTA, which may often also be WeChat or Alipay, which I used to do, paying my bills, doing everything. Yeah. I receive the text. There will often be a code for like a hotel web app that I can use to go and check in. On that, I open it up. There's going to be a key to open the door. There's going to be loads of news about the hotel. There's going to be a little mall part of it. I can buy things. And that'll be activated about the day before I get there. I get there, I arrive to the hotel. Most will still have a check-in desk, just because I've been doing it for ages. And, they do try and account for, let's say, elderly people who prefer to do it that way. But I normally wouldn't use it. I go to my room. Not normally, let's say half the hotels I visit, there'll be an IoT enabled elevator I can use to get there. So I open the same app, I just turn it around, there's a QR code, it takes me up. The smartest ones you go to, they're all facial recognition, but not so much in Europe. So like you get in, it scans your face, it takes you to your floor. I get to the room, if I want, I can still have RFID card. I choose not to for obvious reasons. Then I can use the app to open the door. On the app, there'll also be a code. And I've also received that code via text. I get in, and there won't be Alexa or Google because it's China, but there will be some kind of smart speaker that will normally greet you when I get in there. I can see on the TV that there's all the commerce options that are in the app. I can then also click on that app, normally control standard things like the curtains, the lights. The smarter ones will do things like a coffee machine. We're currently working on smart coffee machines in the Tuya market in China here, but that may be, not emergent. And then it's just, again, that completely connected experience for the hotel, that everything's just outrageously convenient, right? It's that I can just go through this platform that is not only doing fantastic marketing for the business and the hotel itself, but it just makes my experience so much nicer. So I can click and everything's at my fingertips. I can extend my stay. I can use my voice to order room service. I can use the telephone that's still next to the bed. I can use the app to do it. I can do all the same pieces of tech I can use, so my voice, my phone, all the traditional way to control the things in the room. It's just this experience that to me is becoming considerably more standardized. Like Huazhu Group, which is I think maybe the 5th biggest hotel group in the world. They've rolled it out across most of their hotels here in China, I think, or if not a vast majority. And it's becoming like an increasing standard. And this isn't being reserved in China for like the 5 stars. Normally 5 stars are actually the opposite. They will have tech available, but they focus really a lot on the human service because people expect that's what they're paying for. The IoT side at the moment now in China is very, let's say, accredited towards business hotels on a basic level. It's just like you say for those business travelers who don't want that human interaction really, but the hotel's still thinking, okay, how do I squeeze revenue out of him? How do I offer these more opportunities for him, make his stay nicer, but then also sell him things whilst he's here? And that's how I find it to be. When we go to, let's say when my girlfriend gets me to go to the nicer hotels, I normally stick with the business one. Again, there's a considerable level of service being provided on a human level that differs. They still provide the option most of the time, but they're a bit slower to catch up than the business hotels on the OT side. But it's just being reserved mostly on a business level, and on the higher end, those that focus on tech, it's more being flashy with it as a marketing thing. So I can use my face to go and get breakfast, to scan everything. They have like smart gyms I've been to at hotels, you know, where there's this like touch sensitive dance floor I can use. I didn't use it, and maybe if I did, the videos will never be shared. But you know, these are pushing on the gimmicky side of things. But I think the key message from our side and the IoT point is that don't consider it to be something reserved for like 5-star hotels or Japanese hotels with dinosaurs at the front desk.
Yeah, exactly.
These are things that are mostly, to be honest with you, targeted toward business hotels. From our side, that's our target client, let's say, hotels that focus on that point. Just because it massively streamlines operations. It's largely around the locks. We didn't really talk too much about the other side today, but it's just adding that stack to make that experience much more fluid for the guest, much more efficient, but also open up some more retail as a connected hotel.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there is a chapter in my book where I talk about that and talk about like it's all the book is pure speculation. Okay, it's my vision of what hospitality is going to look like in the next 20 years or so. And there is a chapter about how I see hotels in like 10 years, 10, 15 years. And that is, to me, we'll not be talking about like star rating or not even reviews anymore, but there will be like a techno-centric hotel, tech-centric, human-centric hotel, and hybrids. And that is exactly what you were saying, right? So like I think a lot of the hotels will start to implement anything from IoT to touchless tech to make sure that they can cut the number of human employees to the minimum and offer better rates. And I think that will be great, like for business or for budget traveling, right? And then you will have like the property in the middle, and that I think will be the majority of properties, where you will have like a hybrid of, you know, tech taking care of one part of the tasks and humans taking care of the rest. And then you will have like the luxury. And now when we think about luxury today, it's like, okay, you know, beautiful swimming pool, like beautiful rooms, and, you know, like wellness center. But maybe in the future, we will think about luxury in the way that luxury will be everything that will be done by humans, right? So you will be willing to pay to make sure that a human being is following you up for pretty much any request, like from whatever, take my luggage, that will not be a robot, that will be a human. Even if, again, there's no need to, like, why should a human do that? You know, there's no added value, but maybe you want to see people suffer. I don't know. And so that to a certain extent makes sense. So I totally agree with you. On top of that, you said something else that really resonated with me, and it's the fact that you guys have something amazing like WeChat that we do not have. There's nothing like that in Europe. Like in Europe, travel, well, even retail to a certain extent is completely fragmented, right? So I think for you it's even more frustrating where you come to Europe and you see that there is this disconnection between everything, okay? And because you're not used to that, you got this beautiful closed ecosystem where you can pretty much do whatever you want. You know, you can pay, you can book, and you know, you can use it for so many different things. And we don't really have something similar to WeChat in Europe, and we don't even understand that. Like you know, I have a lot of clients that they want to get more Asian guests, and they do everything they shouldn't do. Like, okay, I want more Chinese guests. Let's advertise on Google. Okay, this is not really the way to go. You know, probably let's build a microsite on WeChat. You know, it will make way more sense. And so I think for you, it's probably even more frustrating. But yeah, I totally agree with you 100%.
I think you can take the two sides of that, right? For me, you know, I haven't lived here all my life. I've only been here for the past 2-3 years now. So I do see both sides of the coin, and I continually miss certain things more. So for example, if I'm flying back to Italy and I'm staying in a vineyard in Tuscany, I don't really want the full smart experience. You know, I'm there to go and have this like amazing experience with local people, right? It's
company values.
Yeah.
Company values. What I told you before. Exactly. That's not being crazily high tech. It's not company values. Just going there to sleep and drink.
Yeah, it's, you know, take what suits your company, right? Like, what's your selling point here? For most people we work with, tech shouldn't be your selling point for your hotel. Like it's reserved for 1% I see of people that we work with, you know. The majority is just how does it enable things to work better around me? Like on really simple terms, you know, the IoT we see most popularly adopted is not sexy stuff. Like, you know, people often like to have robots flying around everywhere when we talk about what is going to be this smart hotel. The most common things from our side we see being implemented, yes, smart locks is one. Certain sensors for things, for example, occupancy sensors, or particularly during COVID, knowing how many people are in a public area were like a huge bestseller. I see great work being done also on the Airbnb side, actually. I'll give a shout out to the guys at NoiseAware and Minute. We're not really working with them, but jumping back to what we said before, when the tech comes out that just immediately solves a problem, those guys kind of pound that pain point. I thought that was really good. And then also my personal favorite smart device that I love using, because you can get them here. You know, we make them and they go for like $15, $20. And it's just, you know, if you've got an old AC unit in the room or an old TV, it's an infrared rerouter. It's called a universal remote control. So instead of having to like refit the AC unit, you essentially put in this device for like $10. And you can then use your phone as essentially as a remote for the AC or for the TV.
Yeah.
These are all like really not sexy things to do, but they make such a huge difference.
But again, look, I think the problem, probably one of the problems is all the science fiction movies from the 80s. I think they gave us a strange perception of technology. And I was talking like one of you know, a friend of mine, she's the CEO of this huge chatbot in Japan. And they do several things, and they do hospitality as well, right? So they got like a lot of data. And we were having dinner once, and I said, "Look, what is the question that is asked the most to a chatbot in hospitality?" And I was expecting something like crazily, you know, high tech, like, you know, do you guys have like facial recognition or, you know, drones or whatever? And it said, "You want to know? Is the tap water drinkable?" You know, so that is the most asked question. And again, technology doesn't have to be sexy. Technology usually is not sexy. It's just solving a problem, improving the efficiency, reducing the workload of people, and even if I don't like the word anyway, just making your experience frictionless to a certain extent. Yeah,
I agree. There's an interesting question actually that came from that I was trying to guess in my head as you were saying it, what's it going to be? I was like, what do I normally ask the front desk? And it definitely wasn't the tap water one. I guess I've been here.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Then I started like I do have some share in a chatbot company, a small chatbot company here. And again, then I just, the most interesting thing to me is just looking at the questions. And it's always like the most basic stuff, like, can I bring my dog with me? Like, or, you know, do you guys have a parking or something like that? You know, it's not like, it's never, can I pay with Bitcoins? You know, it's never that.
What's your transaction address? I'll transfer you.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'll ask you a question again on that then. Again, talking away from tech being sexy, but you know, I've again come to accept certain standards that I work with here now. I will admit, you know, quite openly, not in a, let's call it a bragging way, but just the tech adoption with the IoT side has been a bit further ahead here in China. There's been a number of reasons, one being supply chain, two being, well, the reason we're doing this is that there's quite a few providers in the region, therefore it's just more readily available. And then see some cultural differences as well. But on the ground in Europe and also what you've seen in the rest of the world, let's pick an individual part. I'll take access control. And I haven't been to a hotel that's given me a key, like an actual key, in a long time. But is that still, do you think, very common at the moment from your experience working around? Or is it still like people mostly working RFID?
Look, so I was in Sardinia last week. I will not tell you the name of the property. Beautiful property, and I was there for like giving a lecture, right? And they didn't even give me a magnetic key. They gave me a physical key. like, with this huge key holder, like, so the first, of course, the first thing I did, I just removed the key holder and just put it in my jeans, because it was impossible. So you still have it. And I don't know, like, sometimes it's you can call it, like, you can market it as nostalgia marketing, if you will. But it's still like, look, it's so uncomfortable, like, it's so uncomfortable just to go around with keys. So it's you can see it a lot, key.
Yeah, like to me, the example I always like to give is that when I lived in the UK, I grew up in quite an old house, and all the properties I lived in growing up all were physical keys. And I think this kind of aligns with what we're saying today. And I think I mentioned to you last time, it was never a problem for me. Like, there was times I had to, once I broke a window to get in, the other time I had to jump over a fence. But it's something that at the time, maybe because the tech wasn't that readily available, I was like, okay, I can accept it, my mistake. And then I moved here, and every apartment, I've lived in 6 different apartments now, and every single one has a smart lock, right? So it's now like, okay, for me to go back would be a real pain in the ass, and that's the cause of friction, right? It's, these are things that I put into my head, and they often translate from apartments to hotels in things that I don't want to go backwards, right? And this is the friction we talk about. There's now, like, I'm moving into an apartment next week, actually, and now that one was pre-installed with a range of smart lighting or smart curtains in there. And in time, that's going to continually be more common, right? Most people, there's some companies in the US who are doing loads of great smart apartment work or IoT connected apartment work. And it's the same thing. It's especially for young people in a rental property or a hotel, once you start having this as your standard, and you get so used to things, particularly in a rental property, because you do it for a long time, it's over time, I'm not saying it's coming next week, but certain things will, as we've discussed today, become that frictionless experience in which you are now going back in time with your hotel, right? Like the TV example you gave as well.
But you come back to my point again, like technology that will be mainstreamly adopted will be the one that will make your life easier. And that is not only for hospitality, that's for anything. It's like saying, look, I can go now, take my phone and listen to whatever I want on Spotify, right? And it's like saying, but I like it better when we had Napsters back in, the late 90s, and it took 3 hours to download a song. And that's, for nostalgia reason. And that, to me, it's the exact same thing. It's when you do something and you always do it in a way, like, probably you don't even understand that there could be, like, different approaches to that, right? You're used to that, and that's fine. Okay. The moment you do it on a different way and you see that that is working better, you get used to that and you get comfortable with that. That is, again, what COVID did, in my opinion. Just it exposed people to technologies they've never seen before. Like, this is what I called, let me tell you something personal, but this is what I called the Pasquale paradox. Right. Pasquale is the name of my father, right? And this guy, like, considered always against technology all of his life, And at some point, he was going to the bank, like, every week. I said, look, you can do all this stuff online. You don't need to waste like half a day every day. So, no, I don't want to know about that. And after, it took me a couple of hours to explain to him, but now he will never even think about going physically to a bank, right? So it's just, you got exposed to the technology, and this technology can be like complete hype. So it's something like you can like if you're a tech geek like us, or it actually makes your life better, right? And if it makes your life better, it's very hard to go back to what it was before. And this is what hotels need to understand, that, again, technology, I think Japanese dinosaur example is perfect. Technology, the use of technology in hotels is not replacing humans with dinosaurs. We're not building Jurassic Park here. We're just trying to make the experience of the guests as frictionless as possible, because now they expect to have that kind of frictionless experience, right? And moving forward, they will expect probably more things. So you need to start thinking ahead, probably 4 or 5 years from now, and think about what do I need now, but what will I need in 5 years, and build the tech stack around that, right? Otherwise, you will become obsolete, and that will become a problem. So again, you will not become smart. It's just that you will become obsolete if you don't do it.
Yeah, I love the Pasquale complex. And I think it represents something actually on our side as well. I was literally talking to my dad last night, and he was saying the same thing. He's now switching around, and he says, oh, look, I remember I was on the train yesterday coming home. It's still cold in the UK. And he was like, hang on a minute, because I didn't want to come home to a cold house, I went out the house for 6 hours, and therefore I left my heating on and just wasting energy all day, right? So like on a home level, in this individual home, he was like, right, I need to make a change. So I'm now finding him a thermostat to put in the house. And you use the term as improves your life, right? And I think on a smart or an individual home level, it's about life improvement. But I guess in an indirect way, it works for hotels. But when you put that on a business level, and you realize these things, that particularly if you picture it in terms of your own house, which sometimes hospitality people do and sometimes they don't, and then you think, hang on a minute, I wouldn't do this to my home. I can make such huge benefits to my business, particularly in doing this with such small changes. But it's just, again, importantly about having the systems in place, right? Knowing how to do it. It's not like, me saying, okay, quick, I need to fix my heating problem right now. Let me just go and find a random thermostat, put it in place. Because later on, as many people with smart home have done, they realize there's friction between different platforms, right? So particularly for your business, with the risk is much higher. My dad can go and switch a thermostat if he needs to make a change. For you to go and switch 300 rooms worth of thermostats is a problem if it doesn't work for your smart home, right? So I think a key message, we'll probably try and summarize a bit as well, for hoteliers to look at this is, you spoke about it with PMS. It's about making sure that if you're looking to put these systems in place, message one is that we encourage you to think not just about the individual item you're looking to change, but how that works together as part of a puzzle that's going to be coming over the next 4 to 5 years, 10 plus, if you need to think that far ahead, right? Don't think individually, don't get maybe sold so easily on an individual piece. Always keep in mind the platform you're using, particularly around PMS, and just picture these different pieces that come together, again, like part of a puzzle. I think is the key message, is that we're not asking you to become experts, but I think, Simone, that's why your work is very important. As the middleman, I think we're going to need more, sadly for you, people like yourself. We need more people like that, because you act as the middleman, right? It's, as much as we try, and I'm trying to do as more as possible from the tech side, is that we're just trying to be completely open about the knowledge we can provide. We need to provide more and more and more. But for you as a middleman who's seen both sides of the coin, is that you need to be able to translate that value to the hotel, because you've seen others try and implement it, whether or not it's better or worse. And then hopefully try and, let's say, translate what's coming from our side and let the hotelier know, okay, look, first of all, you got to put in the baseline, but you're an expert on PMS systems. And then, okay, now over the next 5 years, this is going to be coming. Here's what I suggest you do in the short term. Here's what's going to be coming over the next few years. Here's how you can implement this in stages and not affect your business. And I think that's why it's really important. And I think that's why, actually, I guess on a finishing note, before we finish, I need to get all your details and tell everyone so they can come and find you, because, we do as much as we can on communicating directly, but I will be completely honest, you're the man for the job, particularly for any end hoteliers listening. We will give as much info as we can, but Simone's really the man who will come and tell you, okay, with these particular issues, I know I've been working on the front desk, this is how it's going to solve your staff problems, particularly around contactless access, something like this. You really help us, and the whole point of this webinar series is that translating the value, and I think it's really valuable. So,
well, thank you so much for that.
No problem. So yeah, I guess on any leaving remarks, Simone will leave your contact details to any emails we send out, or we'll leave them in the chat box today as well, just so people can find you. I'll leave full introductions to your work, because I think it's fantastic. And I think for any people out there listening, it's that from our side, we're doing as much as we can to make the language more understandable, and making sure that these things are implemented in ways that are really beneficial to your business. And Simone's going to be the man there to help you and make sure these things are done properly, particularly in your local markets. So thank you very much for the time, Simone. I really appreciate coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So yeah, for now, everyone will probably open up some questions. So if you want, you can post into the group. and we'll get back to you on those. If you have any questions for me or Simone, feel free to leave them in the box, or if not, you can pass over an email to either of our addresses, and we'll get back to you in the meantime. So thank you everyone for coming today, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.